We have 17 Rembrandts on view. In the state of Florida, we've really never had a Rembrandt painting show like this. It is a rare opportunity.
And the only Vermeer is still in private hands, now on view at the Norton Museum of Art.
Hey everyone, I'm Jane Graves. Welcome back. Today we are going to the Norton Museum of Art in West Palm Beach, Florida to see exhibition Art in Life in Rembrandt's Time, Masterpieces from the Leiden Collection. What is the Leiden Collection? It's one of the largest and probably the largest collection of the Dutch 17th century paintings in the world. Let's go inside. Follow me.
The private collection was founded in 2003 by Thomas and Daphne Kaplan, a New York couple. Named after Rembrandt's birthplace, the collection today has over 220 paintings. To learn more, I spoke with curator Rachel Gustafson.
Let's start with the big picture. What is the significance of this amazing collection for the Norton Museum of Art, and mainly, what a score? How did you manage to get it?
Wonderful questions. Well, we'll begin with the overview. So Art in Life in Rembrandt's Time is 76 paintings. They all come from one collection, the Leiden Collection. Yeah, it's a history-making moment, and I think also not just Rembrandt, but his teachers, his students, people working in other cities in this really important period of creativity in the 17th century. So all those things combined make it like a really rare option.
And you organize them by clusters,
That's right.
thematically.
Right.
Can you walk us through the structure? And what do you hope visitors would take? How would it enhance visiting experience?
So the Norton worked really closely with the Leiden Collection curators. So we have Arthur Wheelock, who was a very well-known curator from the National Gallery, and then also Elizabeth Nogrady. So they worked with us to make sure that these thematic groupings would resonate with everyday viewers. So beyond meeting the artists, there's also themes of history, themes of religion. Even the way we cook and enjoy our meals together. So we try
makes
to
it kind of contemporary. You can almost imagine yourself.
Exactly, and that's really was the hope. You know, this is art and life in Rembrandt's time. So how did people 400 years ago at this really interesting time in history live their lives? And so hopefully that's what the show offers as well, a look back. The section we're standing in right now is all about meeting the artists. So you have a lot of self-portraits here of people like Peter van Leers.
I read that he was called Bambacchio because he looked like a caricature.
Interesting character, and this painting is also very hard to decipher, but there's a lot to
like
enjoy
magic
in it.
and everything.
Magic illusion, yes.
This is Rembrandt's self-portrait with shaded eyes, one of about 80 known self-portraits. These works were practical, personal, and popular with collectors. He also used them for teaching. Right next to it, we see a portrait of Rembrandt painted by his pupil, Isaac de Jouterville, a copy of Rembrandt's painting, The Artist in Oriental Costume, with a poodle at his feet, now in the Musée des Petits Palais in Paris. Another young painter in Leiden would become both his friend and rival, Jan Luyvens. A year younger than Rembrandt, he was considered a child prodigy, maybe even more promising. The two young artists borrowed each other's techniques and compositions and may even have shared a studio. In this painting, Card Players, Luyvens used Rembrandt as a model, a man with a pipe in the middle. It reminds me of Caravaggio's card sharps. Both of them studied with Peter Losman, a Dutch Baroque painter who spent some time in Italy studying Renaissance painters. He is mainly known for biblical, mythological, and history paintings. He taught Rembrandt composition and likely introduced him to chiaroscuro, the dramatic contrast of light and shadow.
So what we're approaching here is Minerva in her study. This is actually the largest Rembrandt in the exhibition, inch by inch. And it's a wonderful way to be introduced to this exhibition. It's actually the first work you see upon entry if you were to visit the museum. Stunning, yeah, it really holds our attention. And the thing I always like to point out about this particular painting is it really marks a defining point in the history of art. Rembrandt is really one of these first artists that engage with an idea of naturalism when he paints figures. So you'll see essentially not an idealized goddess in this example, but an everyday woman being depicted or historicized as a goddess. So she has wrinkles under her eyes, she has flushed cheeks. So she is an everyday woman dressing in an allegory of this goddess.
Such a departure from his teacher, for example, right?
Exactly.
Peter Lassmann.
In fact, Peter Lassmann's just behind us. And you're right, when you look at his paintings, you realize there's a real theatricality to them. There's a real precision to the way the figures are illustrated. And Rembrandt does take a diversion from that to seek a more naturalistic representation of his sitters, even if they're steeped in allegory. Like this example, Minerva being the goddess of war, but also the goddess of wisdom, a patron of the arts. And so rather than engaging in warcraft, you see she's turned her back to those objects, the helmet, the staff, the shield. She's not looking at them. Instead, she's looking at her studies, right? And it's also another characteristic trait of Rembrandt to depict his figures in moments of inaction. So not someone in a history painting where you think of like Jericho's The Raft of the Medusa, where people are fighting for their lives in this competition. In this example, she's meditative, she's still, and that is another thing that sets Rembrandt apart.
Yeah. Do you think it's Saskia?
There's wonderful literature about this that debates this. I think there's some elements that really remind people of Rembrandt's wife, Saskia, as he depicts her again and again.
Right.
And yet, we're not entirely sure. While she resembles her, it's almost like she's a hybrid of a few different, perhaps Dutch ideas in her head.
Yeah, they needed to be kind of plump.
Exactly.
Because they're well fed, so...
Yeah, this is a rich country at this time, so
Yes,
economically they're prospering, and I think we do see that in the physique of these sitters, yes.
Let's take a look at the portraits in the next room. When Rembrandt moved to Amsterdam, he became one of the most in-demand portraitists among the city's wealthy elite. This is Rembrandt's brother-in-law, well, sort of, through his wife Saskia's sister. Portrait of a young woman is also called the Middendorf Rembrandt, after an American ambassador to the Netherlands who owned it. In Amsterdam, Rembrandt lived in the heart of the Jewish quarter, and many of his sitters came from Ashkenazi and Sephardic communities. Thomas Kaplan's favorite piece in his collection is the smallest Rembrandt work, Bust of a Bearded Old Man. An interesting story here about this velvet case behind glass. The painting once belonged to Andrew Mellon, who ordered this special custom-made travel box and took the painting everywhere he went with him. Early in his career, Rembrandt explored the five senses through a series of small allegorical paintings. Kaplan owns 3 of them. This is Allegory of Touch, stone operation. Looks more like paint than touch. A remarkable fact about this one, Fainted Patient, Allegory of Smell. A starting bid at a New Jersey auction for this unknown at the time painting was $500, sold for about $800,000, and then Kaplan acquired it for $5 million. The last one here is Allegory of Hearing, 3 musicians. The fourth of the senses, sight, is at a museum in Leiden, and it's believed there was one more, taste, which is lost.
And now we're coming up to Carel Fabritius's Hagar and the Angel. A lot of people might not recognize his name, and that's because his history kind of is...
The goldfinch.
It's the goldfinch, right. If anyone's familiar with fiction, they're well aware of Donna Tartt's The Goldfinch, and on the cover of that well-known book is Fabritius's own painting of a goldfinch. And here is one of the very rare history paintings that survived. I say survived because Carel Fabritius himself dies unexpectedly in the 1654 Delft explosion that takes out almost all the city. It almost kills Vermeer. Luckily it doesn't. But Fabritius at the time was the head of the Delft school. So Rembrandt's in Amsterdam. We have a few people in Leiden and Rotterdam and Haarlem. But Carel Fabritius and Vermeer are our Delft school artists.
Right.
And Carel is really leading the Delft school movement up until the time of his death. And after he dies, Vermeer steps in to take that leadership role. And so it's a big what if, if Carel Fabritius didn't die unexpectedly, what could have become of him? But the reason he's included in this exhibition is because he's actually one of Rembrandt's most talented students. He worked in Rembrandt's studio in Amsterdam before striking out on his own. And what I love to point out about this painting, particularly in conversation with the Minerva that we just saw, is that you see an even further departure. So as Rembrandt departs from his teacher Lossmann, Fabritius is departing from Rembrandt a whole nother step.
Different, yeah.
An incredibly painterly painting compared to the very unseen brushstrokes in Rembrandt's Minerva. Here you actually see that painterly quality. Things feel a little bit looser, they feel a little bit more expressive. And although this is another history painting like Minerva, instead of being shown a mythological scene, instead we're given a biblical scene in a moment where Hagar thinks she's going to pass, her son will pass. This angel appears and says, "Do not fear, I will save you." And that message for this part of the country, the Netherlands in the 17th century, would have completely resonated with them. A contemporary viewer would have seen this and said, let's keep hope. We will see our own divine intervention if we only stay the course. And so there's a message, a moralizing message, that encourages them to stay the course, to keep their hope, and all will work out well through the divine intervention of God.
Since you mentioned that he was one of his most talented students, I just want to mention Gerrit Douw.
Yeah, Douw's amazing as well.
Yeah, he was probably, it's completely different style.
Right. Yeah, so I'd say there's two philosophies. So there's people like Gerrit Douw who chose to
Leiden
go...
school.
Yeah, they choose to go more in the tradition of fine painting, like Frans van Meers, for example.
Right.
He's another artist that does
His most talented student.
Yes.
In turn, right?
Yeah, and he's Douw's student, so he's a second generation removed.
Right.
But when you look at paintings by those individuals, everything is very finely done.
They said he used magnifying glass.
To capture everything. I would believe it. Every hair on the head is perfectly done.
How fine it is. They were saying that there are up to 10 layers in some of his paintings, some parts, but the surface is completely smooth. Very different technique. I also read that he would come to his studio and would sit there for 15 minutes until all the dust settles, so that nothing would touch the canvas. No dust. And then he would start painting. It's a part of a pendant. There is another painting of a woman with broken, cracked eggs in Hermitage in St. Petersburg. This one, it's Gabriel Metsu. What's interesting about this portrait, someone mentioned that she looks like Christina Ricci. Now, when I look at her, she does look like Christina Ricci to me.
But then you'll see students like Fabritius who abandon it. You can't make out a hair on any of their heads in this example.
Very broad brushstrokes.
Yes.
And you also mentioned Vermeer. There is, I think, one of the marvels of this collection. It's small.
It is.
Tiny, but precious one should be.
I think I would love to talk about that one next, shall we?
Let's go.
Okay.
And this is Vermeer.
Yes, our own private moment with her. This is Young Woman Seated at a Virginal. This is the only Vermeer left in private hands. The rest of them, of course, all in public collections, which is wonderful, but this is the only one privately held still. This, to me, is such an eloquent picture. It's such a... Many people, when they talk to me about it, they say they don't see it as a characteristic Vermeer. I hold the opposite belief. I see this as being very Vermeer-like in its meditative state, in the way that the gaze captures our attention.
There's very little blue in it. Maybe
Very
that's
little blue. That could be, it could be a color palette situation. And I think when most people think of Vermeer, they of course think of girl with the pearl earring. And even in this example, pearls are present. At the top of her collar, you'll notice two little dots of white, and there's a pearl necklace hidden under her shawl. So the Vermeer at the Norton also has pearls, just in a different way. And instead of kind of emerging from the black ground that we see in Girl with the Pearl Earring, in this one she's set against like a white lit wall. You don't see the light source, but there's a window above her which draws your attention even more to this, in the individuality of this young sitter. The other thing that I love is she's seated at a virginal or a small piano, and the wood is so polished that it actually casts the reflection of her hands and her legs right back into the piano. So these are the beautiful things you can only see in person and take in when you look at a work here in the flesh rather than online or on your phone. It's really a unique experience.
Another Frans Hals here. That one was a bad guy. He was
100%. Yes.
Against women.
Yeah.
He wanted them to be
Domestic abuse. Yeah.
Exactly.
Submissive. Yes.
He was not a popular guy.
No, that's why I don't like talking about him. Yeah, but this example by Frans Hals is truly a treasure. This is a portrait of a known individual. His name is Samuel Amsig. And what's funny about him is, well, beyond the technique Frans Hals uses, and we'll get into it in just a minute, he's actually holding his best known book, which is a history of the city of Amsterdam. So the book in his hand kind of tells you the story of who he is as a sitter. But when you start looking away from those parts, when you start looking at the details, and we call it the edges, so the edges of his jacket, his hands, when you move away from the face, the brushwork gets more fluid, it gets more painterly. And again, these are the things that these artists are doing that give other artists that follow them permission to go even further with this experimentation in the kind of brushwork they're using. And so this is the most perfect way of illustrating light on the tip of the nose, this dot of white paint, and you can kind of see the stoicism of this sitter. I think it strikes you, and you can know that he's a learned individual. And yet when you look at the finer details of this painting, you start to realize, okay, Frans Hals is taking a bit of liberty here. And his hands particularly, I think, are so expressive, and I can linger and look at those all day.
And this is a Latin inscription there. What does it say?
I'm not exactly sure what the inscription says, actually. That you would need the Leiden Collection curator to tell you.
All right.
It's interesting because there's a lot of debate around artists of this period and their uses of different lenses or different perspectives in sight. Like Carel Fabritius has this painting of a view of Delft that feels almost concave. And there's all this talk about Vermeer's use of a camera obscura, which is highly debatable. And there's also these stories around Frans Hals and the fact that he's like a camera focusing on your face, but everything else gets a little more blurry. There's something to be said about that, but no matter what, we can say he's taking some artistic liberties that previous artists weren't willing to do.
He's great, yeah. This is, I love Frans Hals. I mean, Rembrandt is probably one of the greatest, but I think it's like a trio, right? Rembrandt,
Frans
Johannes
Hals,
Vermeer, and Frans Hals.
Yeah, I'd say they represent like the super centers of the area, and they all led their own little studios and schools and influenced all generations of artists that came after them, whether because they taught them or because, like modernists that come hundreds of years later, like even the Impressionists or Francis Bacon, de Kooning, they all reference this period of art making as an inspiration. And I think where you see that the most is in these little gestures where the fine painting falls away instead to favor an expressive brushstroke.
And for planning purposes, this exhibition is on view only until?
Just to the end of March, so only a few more weeks.
Unfortunately, yes. So come and see if you have a chance. If you're in Florida, that's the event not to miss. But if you cannot do it in person, you can go to the website.
Yeah, the Leiden Collection website is a great wealth of knowledge. I mean, you can learn so beyond what even the labels can begin to tell you. They have an entry on every work of art. They have more than 200 objects in their collection at large. So If you're interested in this period of art making, they are a wealth of knowledge.
This exhibition also coincides with the 400th anniversary of founding of New Amsterdam on the southern tip of the island of Manhattan, New York. Keep getting inspired. I'm Jane Greaves from West Palm Beach. See you soon.